All right.
We only just started recording, so that whole motion. Yeah. Cheers.
Okay. We'll go again now that the recording's done. Good evening. The time is now 4:02 on June 21st, 2022, and it is time to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Yeah, we please note the attendance for the record. Thank you. And committee members, having reviewed the agenda, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right,
I second.
thank you. At this time, we typically ask whether there are any members of the public who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. At this time, there are no members of the public that are in attendance at City Hall. And I will quickly confirm that there are no committee members who are online either, guys. There are not. So in that case, we can go ahead and move on to the approval of the minutes. The minutes are from June 6th, 2022. Council members, are there any questions or concerns about the minutes?
I have no objections.
Okay, in that case, is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
Seconded.
Thank you. All right, in that case, let's put this on to agenda bill. This is AB 22-096, police take home vehicles. Go ahead and read the introduction to the record, and we'd love to hear from police. The intro states the police department is proposing the adoption of a take-home car program and move from the current city purchase of police vehicles to a lease program. The take-home car program proposal is to increase the number of police applicants, attract competent and qualified applicants, and as a retention incentive for our current officers. The leasing program allows for better planning of future costs, while also incurring anticipated cost savings in the future. Chief Phipps.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to present, which has been talked about for months, our take-home car proposal program. There's going to be a presentation by Officer Chase Smith, who has presented on this issue before, and also a financial budget analysis by Drew Coutet. I'm just going to basically introduce Chase initially, and then I'll come back to questions afterwards. But this program is important for two big reasons. One of them is retention of our officers. Again, last week was notified by another senior officer that he would be leaving July 31st. Every time we lose an officer, if we hire a new one that is no experience, not allowed, that is about $150,000 cost to our budget to do that. And so every time we lose an officer, it's going to cost us that $150,000 unless I can find a lateral. And you are aware that that's very, very difficult for us to do at this point. And so part of it is the retention of the great officers that we have right now. And the other one is the incentive to hire. What this does is this allows us to recruit from a bigger pool from areas outside this city, this community, where many of us cannot afford to live. Therefore, we have to find a solution to how we can find officers from different locations, and this is maybe the solution to do that, where they can really extend their home place of residence further out than this community and bring them in via using a city vehicle. I think both of them are very important. And final thing I'll say is basically, you know, the officers are the ones that are champions to this. I lived in a take-home car world for 30 years. It does save us money as a community. It has a lot of great benefits. I lived it for those 30 years. But the champions in this whole thing are our police officers. They're the ones that have been at the tip of the spear on this. They've brought it forward. They've done a tremendous amount of work on not only the take-home car program, but the leasing program that's going to be proposed. And so, you know, I support that. I support that because if that's what these officers really believe is important in their job, then I'm going to be a champion as well for them. And it's not something new. I remember when Sergeant Wise came to me when I first started 5 years ago, and he talked about leasing vehicles was the way to go. And we've seen that. We are one of the few departments now in the area that do not have take-home cars. Recently, the Snoqualmie Police Department went with take-home cars as well as a retention incentive. So they actually did both. But we're just trying to propose the fact that I think it's needed a solution to help us recruit and retain. Thanks.
Point of order, the record indicate that Mayor Ross is present.
How can we miss that?
The point is well taken.
Point of order, is this a legal police chase? Right here?
Am I a legal police officer?
No,
Do I look like one? Oh, legal police chase. I gotcha.
it can't be the person who heard that one.
No, people do say that often with the what's the dog, the police dog. His name's Chase.
Oh, is
Yeah, that's one. Yeah. Alrighty, I'm going to get started. So as the chief said, thank you all very much. So I gave a very similar presentation to you a few months ago. There have been some modifications to it. So I'm just going to rewind a little bit and talk about how we got here today. So take-home vehicles are becoming increasingly popular in the state. We've been trying to implement them, as the chief said, for the past 5 years. And it's was the number one want throughout our contract negotiations that we wrapped up a few months ago. So in March, Mayor Ross and City Administrator Sauerwein met with the police department, and I gave them this initial presentation there. And they recommended taking it to the Public Safety Committee, which I did a few months ago. And since then is when this thing has really started to evolve. We've met with various department heads, fleet, finance, IT, several meetings, and then we're back here today. So if you remember, the previous proposal was a pilot program for take-home vehicles with no new vehicles being added. But as I was saying, as this has evolved, the new plan is to do leased vehicles and then a full-time take-home vehicle program for the officers. And I'll dive into that a little more in depth. So the goals of this presentation is to explain how this benefits the city, explain how this benefits the police department, discuss our vision for the program, and answer any questions that you all may have.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
can you add one more thing to that?
Absolutely.
Because one thing that I want to hear about that I don't see specifically listed on there is how does this benefit the police officer?
I'll get into that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I
sure.
because I think that's a little bit, I want to know how this benefits you,
Yeah, I'll give you some examples of
because
that.
I checked all my payments, I don't have $150,000 in.
Me neither. Me neither. So program benefits for the city. So the most comprehensive study that I found on take-home vehicles is a study actually locally here at Snoqualmie Police Department. It was an 8-year study conducted by an outside consultant and professor from the University of North Carolina. And what that study found is take-home vehicles reduce operating costs per mile by 30%. That cost savings is based off a longer vehicle life, less damage, accident repair costs, and reduced maintenance costs. So last year, the city spent over $100,000 on engine replacements and transmission replacements on high mileage vehicles. That was 6 Tahoes that new engines and new transmissions, and the cost over $100,000. So another bonus to take home vehicles is an increased ownership of the vehicle, resulting in lower maintenance costs. Another study I found was out of Daytona Beach Police Department. The fleet manager was quoted saying, maintenance and repair costs have gone down on the program vehicles. Officers take better care of the vehicles over pool cars because no one else can blame for the poor care. They also don't run the vehicles as hard, which is better for fuel mileage. The user will keep the vehicle cleaner, inspect it on a regular basis, answer up to damage, and generally take more pride. This also gives the citizens and the criminals perception of more officers on the street, which reduces opportunistic criminal activity. And what I mean by that, more officers on the street is, right now we're sharing cars, using pool cars. It takes between 25 to 40 minutes per day to load and unload a pool car and put your uniform on and off. And that results in double-digit non-productive working days a year. The response time for emergency call out is significantly decreased. For example, if we get a call here in the city where all hands on deck, or something where I'm needed, it's obviously gonna be a lot quicker for me to respond from my patrol vehicle for my residents, opposed to going to the station, loading my car, getting my gear on, and then responding to the scene. And probably the biggest portion of this, as the chief touched on, is it's a positive recruiting and retention mechanism in an extremely competitive market. We have a lack of lateral officers expressing interest in our department right now. This is a tool that will help. In speaking with lateral officers that are potentially interested in our department, one of the first questions out of their mouth is, do you guys have take-home cars? This is a retention mechanism because it'll help keep officers here. As I previously mentioned, it was the #1 want throughout our contract negotiations. As the chief said, if we lose an officer, that's going to cost the city $150,000 to hire a new officer. So in 2019, 74% of agencies in King, Pierce, Snoqualmie, and Thursday counties had take-home cars. That was 3 years ago. I expect that number now to be probably about 80% of how many agencies have them.
I have a quick question on that.
Yes.
Do we know if that 74%, is that the situation where the police departments, is it where the employees have cars up and down, or is that where, for example, some select officers or detectives? Like, how is that structured?
Yeah, so that is gonna be the overall agency has them, not just detectives, not special units, but patrol officers.
Okay.
And so I had another
Yeah.
question. So let's say you have a take-home car
Mhm.
and they say, hey, Officer Smith, we need you to come on in.
Yep.
You go to your closet
Mhm.
and you suit up.
Yep.
Are we paying for that time?
I would say from the moment I get the call and
From the moment we get the call, okay, so
Yeah.
now you don't
but I
get,
mean,
let's say your shift is coming up
Mhm.
and you're on at, I don't know when your shift starts, 8 PM, let's say. You're getting dressed at 7:30. We're not paying for that.
Correct.
Right? But if you have to come in at 8 and then
It'd be
get
like
dressed,
overtime.
that
That's
we'd
kinda what
be paying for that
Yeah,
time.
like in our contract, our CPA, for example, if we get called or something like that, if we get a call, then there's, a lot of time that's counted for that.
But that time is saved if you have your vehicle,
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean,
because you have
the
to be in.
response time is gonna be drastically different.
Okay.
In a patrol car, if we need to have a code response, I mean, we're talking, I live in Enid, so it can take me 45 minutes to get here, whereas if I'm running priority in my patrol car, I can probably get here in 15-20 minutes, if not less. Benefits for the police department. Increase in morale. We are worn out right now. Our officers have been working mandatory overtime on every shift for the past 9 months. Officers are being mandatory to work on their days off. I did my time card today and I had 75 hours of overtime this month. Several officers have over 100, and one officer even has over 130. And actually, prior to coming here, that officer told me he has 555 hours of overtime already this year. Fully staffed patrol would be 20 personnel. We are currently at 12 patrol officers. We do have 2 officers that are currently in field training. But as Chief mentioned, we do have an officer that's lateraling to another agency at the end of July. This will also give us the ability to recruit current officers from other agencies. It's difficult for us to recruit fellow officers right now, as other agencies are offering $20,000 in take-home vehicles. While we do have the hiring bonus, which is great, I think not having that take-home vehicle is losing out on a lot of good candidates. A good example of this is we had a great officer that left our agency in December. And I am extremely confident that if we had take-home vehicles, he would still be here. Once again, that's our $150,000 that the city was now on. Familiarity with the vehicle and confidence in its condition, which allows officers to keep their equipment in one place, not to move after their shift or work week. Having a pool car, when you come in on your Monday, stuff's moving around, in the butt, getting back to normal. So just having that confidence, everything's right where I need it, not having to second guess that. I missed an increase in officer safety, as it would increase the backup potential for officers on duty. And what I mean by that is kind of relating to the time of changing it out of your uniform. Officers aren't wasting time at the station, securing their vehicle, changing in and out of their uniform. They'll be available for calls for service when entering city limits, and exiting city limits. And then another kind of interesting point in speaking with Issaquah PD about the implementation of their program is they're having a much easier time filling the overtime shifts. So officers, make it in quicker. It's not as time consuming. All right, now exciting stuff. So the take home and lease vehicle program. What we're proposing is a 4-year, 75,000 mile lease on the vehicles. So how that'll work is if you hit 4 years or 75,000 miles, whatever comes first, that's when you cycle the car out and you lease another vehicle. This is something that we would plan for, so there's not overage costs. Currently with SCI, the overage cost is 20 cents a mile. But this is something that we could forecast for, and a few months, let's say, before that vehicle's due, it's already getting swapped out. Another thing that I put some thought into, which I think will really make this happen, is for example, I commute to Snoqualmie. We have officers that live on the ridge, so I'm obviously going to be putting a lot more commute miles on my car than the officer that lives a mile away. So after about 2 years, let's say, I would swap vehicles with that other officer to help balance that out. So one vehicle is not getting swapped out in 3 years, and another one's, 4 years has only got 40,000 miles on it. So that's something we've considered, which we're totally up for doing, which will help balance that out. So vehicle leases would begin this year with the plan to become a fully leased fleet by 2026. So the price for leasing, $1,580 per month per vehicle. We'd slowly begin leasing vehicles. I'm proposing that we add 4 leased vehicles this year. So once our current vehicles, the ones that this model we have now, we're buying them outright. Once that vehicle would hit the end of their life, we would sell them and then transition that vehicle to a leased vehicle spot. A great thing about leasing these cars is through SCI in North Bend. We have a great relationship with them. They do a ton of departments as big as Pasco. They do, Medina, Mercer Island, ton of departments. So all the equipment is included in that leasing price. Everything from laptops, lights, push bumpers, radios, everything. Good thing about that is that equipment can be carried over 2 to 3 cycles, meaning that equipment can last for 8 to 12 years. So let's say we have a brand new car with new equipment in it. Once we hit 4 years, swap out, just transfer that equipment over. In turn, that's also going to reduce the leasing price per month without having to purchase equipment. So to start this program right now, based on the amount of vehicles we have, there'd only be about 6 officers that would be able to have a full-time take-home vehicle. The remaining officers would have a take-home vehicle on their work week only. Something we understand, we know can't happen all at once. So the mileage allowance on this will be 30 miles as a crow flies from the city limits, and then current officers will be grandfathered in. We only have 2 officers that live outside of the 30-mile range. A vast majority, I think all but 3 people live within 20 miles. I'm at 25. The other 2 are just over, I think one's at 40 and one's at 50. And then an MOU would be created and agreed upon by the city and the SBA. Ultimately, the intent of this program, of this take-home and lease vehicle program, is to increase operational efficiency, provide increased ability to respond to emergencies, improve cost efficiency of vehicle use by reducing overall maintenance costs, and improve hiring and retention of police officers. So, yeah, if you have any questions.
Sounds like the biggest benefits for you are convenience.
Absolutely.
Do you save money this way personally by
Yes.
because
Gas.
you don't have, so this would also help with like your gas coming from Enumclaw is
Yeah.
covered.
Yeah.
So that's a significant benefit as well.
Yeah, but For me, I haven't even really considered that too much. It's just what this will be able to do for the department. Like I said, the increase in morale is huge, the retention. We don't want to lose good cops.
Right.
Good cops are hard to find.
Right, but that benefit, I think,
Absolutely.
it seems like it would help with morale as well.
Yeah.
And retention.
Yeah.
Okay. Well. Is, that's all I got.
So one of the questions that I had was just, I would just want to confirm that the officers would rather have a take-home car than, for example, like the cash value, the difference in the per hour cost as like a retention bonus every year, like that $5,000 or $10,000.
Yeah, I mean, this is a long-term deal. You know, we want to start this and have this be a big selling point to other officers.
Mhm.
And that's, like I said, a big part of this. And yeah, I think, like I said, it was our number one contract one. So yeah, the vast majority of people I've talked to would much prefer this over some money.
Just a couple observations, if I may. One is when an officer is commuting to work, and we all know that we have a number of people that are commuting from outside. It means that they come in a patrol car, they're suited up and ready to go. It means more seamless shift changes for us as a city. I think the other thing too is we can never hire enough police officers for all the things that are happening. We're seeing it in our neighborhoods, our community. But this is one way to help bridge that gap a little bit. Retention wise, it'd be kind of interesting to see what our retention rate is over the last 2 years versus other agencies. Because we could put as the chief pointed out, we put a dollar amount in having those vacancies, and then you've got a choice between laterals or brand new recruits. I think the final thing, and that's the retention, is that we've got to factor in that doing this type of work, the officers that are here and tenured have a much better understanding of the community and the ebb and flow of things than hiring somebody brand new in. And so if this helps, and I assume it will, even though there is a cost involved, and I'm sure Mr. Butte will kind of clue us in on that, that we can show that there is a need, and it helps us have a bigger presence, and I'm very supportive of that notion.
Yeah. Ross, would you meet again?
Thank you. So the 6 officers, how do you determine who the 6 officers are?
Yeah, so right now the plan is for that based on rank. The sergeants, and then the OICs, officers and sergeants. And then we could go obviously in order after that. As we get more cars, more officers will have a full time team of people.
Okay. And then also North Bend would have to buy into this as well, correct?
Correct.
Because I think there's the 8 of you, 8 officers. working
If we
North
were
Bend,
fully staffed, 8 officers.
Right. And so I can't imagine once the plumbing officers get to become cars and the,
Yeah, we would, obviously if North End would buy into it, we have to readdress this. But I know the chief's already had some talk.
Drew will be addressing the budget, specifically how it impacts Snoqualmie and North End. We have had discussions with the administration of North End, and at the initial discussions they are supportive of this. And so, obviously, we will coming before you first to get approval through this process, and then obviously we'll have to go before North End City Council to get approval on their side of that. Drew, you want to come up? Sure, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, council members, and thank you very much, Chief Perry and Officer Smith. We discussed the benefits right in this proposed program. Benefits can be hard to measure, and so we can certainly deal with the retention cost, but we're not factoring in necessarily the overtime expenses that are greater than salaries, right, that we're paying. on a basis? What is the impact on morale and how can we potentially quantify that? You know, we're talking about community knowledge, having those officers here for longevity, improves our overall community knowledge, and so they're better able to serve the community. And then as well as levels of service too, that all kind of adds up to that. And so really, we produced a report here, it's a financial analysis memo. However, this financial analysis memo doesn't exactly quantify the benefits. That's not what we're looking at here. So we have to keep in mind that you've got the benefits over here that you're comparing against the costs. And so what I'm here to do is just focus on those expenses or those costs today. So what Officer Smith has outlined is basically a phased-in approach. We will not see this full program really fully implemented until about 2027 or so. So currently own our own vehicles here. Over time, those would be sold to FCI. Correct?
Yeah, our fleet needs to fit.
Yeah, whatever fleet, and then we would then replace those vehicles with a lease for the most part. So the most important part of this memo is the financial impact table that you'll see on page 2. And I don't know if there's page numbers on this. I think that's probably something that we should have had. But in essence, I want to focus your attention to really maybe the most key number. And that is if you go down to the bottom, you'll see an annual difference row, third up from the bottom. And so what we're doing in this table is we're comparing the current program versus what a lease take-home program might cost us more than that current program, as well as what a purchase take-home program might cost us more than that current program. And we're only looking at relevant costs. So there's costs that would be borne by all 3 of the programs. We're not counting them within this dollar figure that we see here. But this program, what Officer Smith has suggested is a lease take-home program. And so in essence, if you look at that third row up from the bottom, you're going to see that our estimated annual difference cost is roughly $150,000 per year, that present value. And so part of that cost would be borne by the city of North Bend, but it would also be borne by the city of Snoqualmie. Unfortunately, the 2 rows that we see there probably need to correct. So really what I want to show you next, we go to note 9.
Just as a quick
yes.
question, the difference portion there, does that include the addition of the 3/4 position for the account?
Yes, it does.
Doesn't that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
and would that, are you anticipating that would be the same regardless of which program it was?
So it wouldn't exist under the current program, but would be part of the lease take-home program as well as the purchase take-home program. And so I guess just to go through a few of these items here, as you can see within the ongoing costs section, now obviously under the current, let's start back a little bit further. Under the setup costs, under the current program, what we're doing is we're continuously purchasing vehicles and selling the surplus ones. And so that's why you see sale vehicles and vehicle purchases included within that current program under the setup costs. When you get down to the ongoing costs, if we transition to a lease take-home program, you're going to see things like lease fees. You're going to see things like additional insurance that we're going to need for the additional vehicles we'd have to lease. You're going to see things like administrative increase because we have to support this program for the most part. And then you're also going to see some commuting and maintenance expenses as well. You're going to see that number increase over the current program, primarily because we're going to be adding miles to these vehicles, in essence, more than what we currently do with just a purchased vehicle that isn't taken home. So those are some of the costs that we've assessed for the most part as part of this analysis, and that's why they're included here within this table. Now, if I could direct your attention to note number 9, this is probably the first table that you see under note number 9. This is what the annual difference between a lease take-home program and current program would look like for the city of Snoqualmie and North Bend overall, and you can see a total there as well. And you can see that the dollar amounts are going to fluctuate on an annual basis, primarily because under the current program, we're purchasing vehicles and will likely purchase vehicles in 2025 and 2027. And so during those years, you're going to see actually Snoqualmie, it's going to cost us more because of that purchase of those vehicles under the current program than it would under a lease program, and hence the reason why the number is negative there. But in essence, when you're looking over at the last column, you're going to see an annual average increase for Snoqualmie and North Bend. That average annual increase for Snoqualmie is roughly $50,000. The average annual increase we're estimating for North Bend is roughly $115,000 or so. And so that represents this phased-in approach that we have in this program. Below that, you're going to see another table called the annual difference between a fully leased police fleet at today's staffing levels in the current program. If we were to move to a fully leased fleet right away, it would actually cost the city on an annual basis roughly $145,000 and North Bend roughly $170,000. So really what this represents is kind of, if we're at the same current staffing levels, by the time we were to reach, say, 2027, 2028, city of Snoqualmie might see somewhere of an average of roughly $145,000 additional costs overall to take on this take-home leasing program. And then subsequent to that, we have also added an additional table on your next page under note 10 that describes the annual difference between a fully leased fleet with no vacant positions in the current program. And what you'll see is if we had no vacant positions, all the patrol officer positions were full, we had our sergeants fully staffed and so on. The average annual increase to Snoqualmie would be roughly $225,000 if we were to move directly to a lease program right away today. Basically. And so those just kind of providing some of the ranges of those kind of expenses overall, showing you what phased-in approach would look like. If we're to move directly to the lease program right away, here are some of the costs, and then if you're fully staffed, that's the third table that we're providing. So,
Councilor Martin?
Yeah, do you agree with, the police chief that it costs us about $150,000 if we lose somebody and have to replace them with a new? Do those numbers sound
so it's,
roundabout?
so I think he's pulling that potentially from other studies that he has seen, from his own experiences here and from himself actually managing the budget. I haven't actually looked into that to see potentially what that cost might be, but I do always believe the police chief when he does come up here and stand in front of you. So.
Wow, good for you. Well, it sounds like then the increased costs that we would incur would be saved if we just don't lose an officer or two.
Correct, yes. And then adding on top of that, what I suggest is, okay, if overtime, right, is 1.5 of your salary wages. If we're impacted by morale in this community, what kind of price would you put on that morale, or how, what does that mean for the city of Sioux Falls?
Well, we just lost a police officer, so.
What about the community knowledge? It's hard to really put a price on that necessarily, but that is money we would be avoiding those costs by potentially taking on this program.
Whether or not we can put a price on it now, we will put a price on it later when we have to pay that price.
Right, and as Officer Smith suggested, other cities are doing this program as well, and so maybe to a certain extent, we might be a bit behind the curve on this, and they continue to attract some of our best officers from here, then, we're gonna see our levels of service drop, or burnout continue to happen in the police department overall, and it wouldn't necessarily be the greatest for the community. So,
I don't want to spend our resources training great officers for Spokane.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have some questions. The cost of this program, first of all, we're going from, just please help me follow along. 14 cars to eventually 20 cars in our fleet.
Yes, so that would be based on our current staffing levels.
Okay, all right, so, we'll see it like next year, we're at 20 cars, once we're fully staffed.
So,
Okay.
so there's some, our budget analysts kind of put this table together for the most part. Fortunately, she's not quite here, but in essence, the goal will increase by 4 vehicles, as proposed, the fleet will increase by 4 vehicles in this year, and then 2 vehicles in the next year.
Okay.
And that will get us to 20,
Okay.
based on that schedule provided by.
So with that, in the financial impact that we're reviewing, it's going to, on average, over the course of 6 years or 5 years,
6 years.
6 years, costs us $148,000 more per year
Yes.
to do this plan. Okay, right.
Well,
And then, just to say there's a split difference between North Bend and Snoqualmie, so we're just focused on Snoqualmie. We're going to look at the table in the back again, which doesn't necessarily suggest that it's not in net present value, for example, but the average is roughly $47,000 under note number 9. top table. For Snoqualmie and then 115 for the bin on that. Okay, is what we're estimating.
Sorry, can I just do a quick follow-up? So, but if we were to be fully staffed, at number 10 states, we'd have to have a total of 26 people.
Correct,
Correct.
so you have
And so
24 FTEs and then 2 additional vehicles, just in case there are any sort of emergencies. So in total 26 vehicles, we're accounting for that. Once again, under note number,
10?
yeah, note number 10, correct.
Yeah. So then the average increase then would be the 225,000.
Correct, if we were to move straight to a full leasing today.
Today.
Right, and obviously what they're proposing is to actually phase it in, so. It's multiple scenarios, right? We only have 3 here, but in essence, if we were to be fully staffed today and then phase it in over time, it would be less than what you see under note number 10.
So it includes selling out the vehicles and.
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. As a follow-up on that, but we would not be selling off any of the cars until they reach their useful end of life, correct? We're not just gonna go out and start all these.
I think under the proposal here, we would be selling a North Bend vehicle. I think one that is recently purchased to FCI.
The other vehicles are already scheduled for replacement. And that's part of the ER and R.
Correct.
Okay,
So the next 2 years in which we would purchase vehicles for the city of Snoqualmie is 2025 and 2027.
so on the ER and R, do we have an opportunity as council members to see that, or is that? Do we have that at our, for our review?
So we're putting that together
Okay,
as quickly as possible because we know what council wants to discuss kind of the replacement schedule overall for our fleets. In total, I will say that there are probably 140 assets that we're kind of looking through with fleet right now. In essence, and then we will have a replacement schedule, and then we will discuss how that program actually operates because in essence, we are setting money aside basically on an appreciation schedule for each vehicle so that we have a bucket full where we need to replace that vehicle when it comes due. So right now, the police department is paying into the ER&R fund for the most part, so that when they need that vehicle in 2025 and 2027, here's a bucket of money, go out and purchase basically.
I'm sorry. That does help us, as we're looking at, what our priorities are, and making sure that we cover all of our bases. Thank you.
What, my question was, what is the life expectancy of a vehicle? Like, if we were to purchase a vehicle, how long would we be able to use that vehicle? Assuming, it's taken care of.
So the patrol vehicle, I think our standard replacement cycle is probably 5 to 6 years. Unless the police chief wants to stop.
Well, I'm not gonna believe anything he's.
5 years, 100,000 miles is our goal. We actually have vehicles out there now that have over 180, 190,000.
So, okay, that brings me to my next question. If I'm reading this table on page 12, right, it looks like, and tell me if I'm understanding this right, Mr. Boutte. It looks like the cash price for the vehicle would be about 75 grand. Is that right?
So I don't have a packet. Do you mind telling me if you're looking at a note or?
I'm looking at this table here on page, it looks like page 12. If I'm understanding this right, it says the cash price would be about 75 grand. And that for a 4-year lease, 4 years or 75,000 miles, which would be less than 4 years, potentially. We're looking at about 72,000 being spent, which is a difference of $4,000 or $5,000, or about $4,000 difference. And so what I'm trying to understand is why it is more economically viable to lease the vehicles over purchasing them if we can get 5 years and 100,000 miles reliably out of a vehicle. Then are we are we being a little bit extravagant in leasing a vehicle for 4 years? Or 75,000 miles for the same, for close to the same amount?
So. Like, I think the analysis is showing that it would be more costly overall to take on this lease take home program.
Well, at the end of that time, to Councilmember Christensen's point, we'd also have a vehicle that we could sell for something.
That is true, although depending on how much we could potentially get for that, usually it might be a good surplus value, might be around $10,000 or so in total. Well, at least 10% of that, so maybe about 7,560 is typically what we would budget at for the most part. But in essence, what this analysis is showing overall, right, is the police take-home program is estimated to be more expensive overall than just a purchase program that is what we currently do right now.
I'm sorry, could you
The
repeat that
police
statement?
take-home program is more expensive overall to the city. Now, just focusing on the cost.
All right.
Than the current program, but then we also have to make sure that we factor in the benefits, right, to that, and how much money we could potentially save in terms of retention costs, overtime, morale, community impact, and so on.
So by
I don't
having,
think we would, right, dispute exactly what you're suggesting.
okay, all right, but what you're, but the argument is that in having a more current fleet, that's maybe less beleaguered, that is a greater benefit to our officers and a greater tool in retention and performance.
I mean, I think we'll have to think about that.
I'm trying to do that with you right now.
I prefer to have the complement, right, of the police department and the, parts of Bella Works kind of work through that answer.
Okay,
With me, so.
you got any thoughts on it, Chief?
Yes. Remember that the numbers, and I thank you for all the work that you've done on this. The numbers that are generated that have been brought before you are numbers that have been based on our current way of doing things. So 88 cents a mile is what we say the cost to run our vehicles. That's including the $100,000 that we put into new engines recently. In those 7, that's going to increase that 88 cents. It's been shown through survey and study for as many years as this has been going on, that it's a savings to the community and to the city. One of the big parts is when it's your vehicle, I can tell you from my experience, you have ownership to that vehicle. That vehicle's taken care of. Maintenance is going to be less. It just will be, because when there's something wrong with that, you're going to take it in before it becomes a real problem and an expensive problem. Sure.
But that would also be true of a purchase vehicle as well, right?
Yeah, if it's a take-home car assigned to you individually, absolutely.
So that's a great, I think that's a great argument for the program, period. What I'm trying to do is figure out why it is better to lease than to buy, because I've spent my entire life avoiding leases like the plague. That's all I'm trying to figure out, and I'm agnostic on it. I'm just looking at the numbers and trying to understand the cost benefit analysis as you see it. And I promise I'll believe you if you say something.
This is my opportunity. No, the leasing program has been shown to save significant amounts of money for that community itself. The numbers that were being presented today don't necessarily show that, because like I said, it's being reflected in those numbers were generated on what the past history is. And I see what you're getting at. If you own the vehicle, maybe the lifespan is from 5 years to 6 years. So you're owning that vehicle for an extra year. But it's still been shown that a leased vehicle is cheaper to go that route than to own the vehicle itself. And I think I can probably show you those studies if I have the time to do that.
I have a question. I thought you said that the purchasing was less expensive. Although the numbers don't show it out.
The purchasing is a roughly, we budget $75,000 per vehicle is what we run. So I believe leasing is gonna be less, it's like 71,000 over that period. But you also save on the equipment of that vehicle as well. Officer Smith had mentioned the fact that equipment can be transferred to another new leased vehicle. Instead of buying like we do now, when we buy a vehicle, we replace everything in that vehicle. We won't have those incurred costs.
But that would be the case with purchased vehicles as well, right? There would be equipment that you'd be able to take off a purchased vehicle before selling it to replace. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me add this one thing to your question. So the reason leased vehicles are gonna be cheaper is that maintenance. So when all these cars are hitting 80, 90, 95, 100,000 miles, that's when fleet was having to do all these replacements. So over time, opposed to going through all those engine replacements and expensive replacements, we're swapping those cars out. Because these patrol cars aren't meant to have a super long life cycle.
So then the argument is that year 5 and 6
Yeah.
are expensive
Yes,
years.
we're getting rid of them before we have issues with them.
So you're sending them to the
Yeah.
old cars home
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
bringing in the new
Yeah,
young.
give them more about
Okay,
health.
right. That makes sense. Thank you.
To the mayor's question, the reason why I'm suggesting that, or what I suggested is primarily because we're comparing the current program against this lease take-home program that would add vehicles, right, overall. And so hence the reason why I'm suggesting that this take-home program is more expensive than this current program, primarily because we're adding vehicles as well as the fleet.
So you're comparing to our current program, you're not
Yes.
comparing whether we take, lease the same number of cars
No,
and purchase the same number of cars.
no, so their point these 2 points are not mutually exclusive.
Well, thank you for taking the time to explain it, all of you. That was helpful for me. I'm not gonna believe anything anymore.
Any other questions that you may have?
Maybe we hear from Mr. Chambliss.
Of course. Probably why he's here, watching over us.
Good afternoon, Chair, council members. First of all, I support what the chief said 100%. My previous city that I managed, they were assigned patrol cars. And it did lower major repairs considerably. They're just, in fact, I started doing it in the public works department too. People just take care of the stuff that they have to rely on every day. And they also know that they'll be held accountable if it's trashed, if they're the only operator. So that totally back. As far as the lease program, if we go the lease program, I just want 2 cars as spares. Because if something happens, we could just put the officer in their car and they can go, it's already equipped and everything else. As for leasing and buying, Public Works doesn't have a position on it either way. There are some fine print things in leases where if we don't manage the mileage appropriately, it could become a costly endeavor, but it should save money. As far as the equipment being moved for vehicle either program, that can happen. Currently, it doesn't. It is my intention next year to get into that ERR program and do a review and ask questions. I don't think that's happened in a while. And aside from maybe 1 or 2 pieces of the equipment package not fitting on the newer model car and needing to be replaced, I do believe some of it could be continued to use, such as the lease thing. Yes, sir.
So things like mileage and that sort of thing, those would be things that would be highlighted in whatever MOU we put together on this program. And
I did get a copy of the lease with all the fine print. I don't know if it made it into your package. But there are some clauses in there where if you go over the mileage, there is a fee. I think you said it was 20% mile. So that will be something that we really would need to focus on. One of the reasons why there are cars with extra mileage, and I wasn't here, but this is what I'm learning, is there were times when the council said, no, we're not going to buy cars this year. Even though the ERR program is running for whatever reason, fluidity of funds, etc. Like that, they chose not to buy those cars. Yes, sir.
my other question was, if we're having spare cars, as sort of emergency situation, would those need to be leased vehicles, or do we have vehicles in our fleet that would be appropriate for emergency use only?
I do have a recommendation on that. If we do lease the fleet, I would recommend we own the spares. It seems silly to me to rent things that are intended to sit there for a while. And the need for the spares is with the take-home program. I got one mechanic. If a car breaks down in Snoqualmie, that's gonna have to be towed in. I can't send him to Snoqualmie and come back, even if it's a jump or a flat tire. I need him in the shop. I don't need him on the road. So in that case, they can come in and swap out the cars. The other thing is for planned maintenance, we will be sending the officer an email and say at the beginning of your shift, please come in and switch out the car for the week. And your car will be ready to go by the end of your shift and switch it back out.
It seems like it would also be useful in monitoring the mileage. If a car is at the end of its mileage and needs to be replaced, then one of those vehicles would be the stopgap for until we get.
Correct.
Although it seems to me that if we're monitoring mileage carefully, then
We
we'll be
should
taking
get
care of that before it's a problem.
But it needs to be, that really does, that's what worries me about the police is mileage overs.
It's like 15.
Okay, 50, but it racks up. quick. So,
Well, you just saved us 5 cents a mile, so that's good. For the mayor.
Okay, thank you. If there's chief ups,
In case you had any additional questions. If not, thank you.
thank you. So it's my opinion that we do need to take, action on this, we put it forward on the council's, agenda, correct? To the extent that that's what we're considering,
Would be going to reopening.
or at night.
It is not on FNA's agenda for tonight. And so our hope is that it will be approved to go to city council, full city council. At the next meeting.
Councilmembers, I don't speak for you, but I'm comfortable putting forward on the council, agenda. I think that it's really important that we support our police force, and this is something that they've demonstrated is very important. It's been sitting for a long time. I do anticipate that there will be a fair bit of dialogue and questions on this at council. But I personally would like to say go forward. I'd like to hear from both of you as well.
I'm with you.
I'm in favor. My only consternation is I am going to be missing the next 2 council meetings.
Are you gonna be in?
Will you be able to comment?
I will not.
All right.
So I'm in favor of moving it forward.
So,
So I know that you wouldn't be able to vote, but you could maybe write out something that you are.
I will do that.
Thank you.
okay, well, thanks. So moving on from here, we don't know that there's any other action at this time. We have to
Do you need a motion or anything to send it to council or
Yeah, so moved.
seconded?
All right. In that case, we do not have anything further for discussion items or new business. Nothing new on items for future discussion. I'll check one more time to ensure that we have not had any members of the public strolling. Which we do not. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. That's the way it should be done.
I was just trying to follow the rules.